It was early August in Marin, and the town was still half asleep, but I was awake, and as usual I was thinking about the dead. I lay belly up in front of a rusting fan doing its decrepit best to fight off the heat. The fan turned painfully slowly, a rickety side to side, like a geriatric old woman crossing the road one agonizing, shuffling step at a time. The creak of the blades rotating cut through all the dead faces crawling around in my head. I thought about throwing it out of the window, ending its suffering, but it was too hot to sacrifice even the tiny breeze it was giving me. I had my legs kicked above my head, resting on the wall that was covered from top to bottom in time-stained Polaroids, like a wallpaper print of all the people I loved the most. I slept each night with them watching over me, my celluloid guardian angels forever watching, so I wouldn't forget their faces. Sweat pooled in my collarbones, and even though the blinds were closed, the sun was relentless as it fought its way through the gaps. Chrissy came in, footsteps loud and so familiar I didn't need to look to see if it was her because I knew her from the soles up. From soul to soul was the way it felt. She threw herself down onto my bed like she had so many times before, shape familiar as my own on the blankets. Her bright pink hair fanned out from her temples like a sunset in late June, a soft and beautiful chemical smear carrying the whole summer sky on her head. "Fuck me up the ass and call me Jesus, but it's hot," she said, throwing her legs up to join mine. Her dusty combat boots hovered against the Polaroid wall. Her right boot came to rest in front of a photo of us on the first day of high school. Eyes bright, middle fingers in matching chipped purple polish flipped up at the camera. Arms slung around each other. Her left boot fell against a Polaroid of me doing a handstand she'd taken at the beach. The year her brother Travis got his license, we spent all spring just driving out of town as fast as Travis's truck would go. Chrissy screaming at him to go faster, shaking his headrest, all of us pretending we'd never heard of shitty little place called Marin, as the streets disappeared behind the tires in a cloud of dust. "Well then, Jesus, did you bring any lube?" I said. Chrissy grinned and stuck out her tongue as a reply, too lazy in the heat to think of a comeback. We lolled our heads and let them hang off the mattress. The room was now upside down, but Chrissy was still the right way up. That was how things often seemed these days. "It's gonna happen again, Sadie," she said with her eyes closed. The heat pressed in, and outside I could hear a sprinkler starting up. Summer lazed on through the morning, but I was now wide awake, and the dead were loud in my head. Again. Okay, I sat up. That was all there was to say. No point in questioning the inevitable. When and where? Don't know that yet. Don't even know his name yet. He's getting hungry. Her forehead creased. He's been dreaming about her. She shook her head. Dreamin' real bad dreams. Just tell me what to do, where to be. We'll stop him, I said. I looked down at her, still the only right thing up in the room. "We always do." I lay back down. "I know." She said, our legs side by side above our heads, almost touching, like we were joined at the hip, grown from the same bones. "But I think you'll have to kill him." I side-eyed her, taking her in as she swore at the fan, panting like a dog in the summer heat. I looked at the constellation of freckles across the bridge of her nose, and the small silver bar through her right eyebrow that flashed like a star when it caught the light. Her eyeshadow was dark, smudged like she'd slept in it, and though right now her eyes were closed, I knew them so well that I knew when they opened, they would be deep green like the trees in spring, right before they burst with flower blooms. I looked at the gaping hole where her jawbone should be on the left side of her face. I could see the rips through the layers of sinew and skin to her cracked teeth, a jagged half-moon slicing across her cheek, putting her face in eclipse. The soft curve of her eye socket hung just below her forest green eye. There was loose cartilage hanging round the crush of her brow bone, poking through sharp and white. I looked at the blood that floats gently in small looping tendrils just above the surface of where her skull is caved in. Chrissy is my best friend, and I never get tired of looking at her face. I guess I should also mention that Chrissy is dead. To be specific, Chrissy is dead because when we were 16 years old, a man hunted her down through the woods, bashed her head in with a rock, and and left her to die after he was done with her body. Chrissy has been dead for 5 years, 11 months, and 22 days if we're being really specific. I started seeing her 2 weeks after she died. At first, I thought the psych ward was calling my name, grief finally pulling me all the way under. But I'm not crazy, I swear. I'm not lying either. The things I've done are very, very real. Chrissy may be dead, but I can't imagine life without her. But let me go back a little, to before that sweltering morning in my room in August. Before I had to hunt down and kill a hungry man I would later find out was named Amos Everett. Before all the bad, I want to talk about all the good, all the love. There's always love, and I forget about it sometimes, but it was there, and it's still here. I carry it. When we met, I was 5, and Chrissy was 5. I had blue eyes like a Crayola sky, and she had green, like apples and grass, and 4-leaf lucky clovers. We loved playing tag in the woods, and daisy chains and ghost stories and glitter. We loved the horses that lived in the field behind the trailer park, would spend hours chasing after them behind the chain-link fences, wishing we could keep up, kicking up clouds of dust and grass with our battered sneakers. We loved stealing gummy worms from the gas station and hiding out in the magnolia trees to share our stolen goods. Sun-melted sugar on our hands, the only evidence left behind. When I fell down, Chrissy would be there to swipe one curious finger through the bloody scrape on my knee before carefully pressing a pink band-aid on top, pulling me back up with both hands, wiping my eyes and spinning us in circles over and over until I stopped crying and started laughing instead. When I was 7, Chrissy was 7. We got the training wheels on our bikes off on the same day, out in the yard practicing with her older siblings and her cousins, getting rides to school with them while my mom was in and out of the hospital. Chrissy's bike was hand-me-down blue with flames painted up the sides by her dad, and she rode so fast it was like she was burning up the sidewalks when she pedaled past in a blur of sugar and blonde hair. My bike was the color of dirt, with butterfly stickers covering up the rust on the handlebars, slapped on with careful application by Chrissy after the other kids laughed at me from my run-down ride. When Chrissy was 8, I was 8. She could run faster than any of the boys in our grade, and I was never far behind, always following on her heels, kicking up dust like a shadow. Sometimes she'd slow her pace a little so we could run side by side in the sun in our white tube socks, matching our strides like we were twins made of muscle and bone. But sometimes there was something in her that just needed to run, and I grew used to the sight of her back as she left me behind, left everything behind. Like if she just ran fast enough, she would grow wings from her shoulder blades and fly away. She would braid my hair for me on the playground, just like her sister Luana taught her, so we could match her with blue ribbons and mine with red. We'd listen to anything on her older sister's busted CD player as long as it was loud, Britney Spears and Sum 41, Tupac and the Backstreet Boys, Avril Lavigne and Willie Nelson. Eating peach rings while her mama painted our nails, sat on the carpet with us cross-legged, playing we were grown up at the salon. I still slept with a nightlight at home, but whenever I stayed over at Chrissy's when my mom was getting really bad, the dark in her room didn't bother me so bad. When Chrissy was 10, I was 10. I was taller now, and she was mad about it. Chrissy loved Beanie Babies, and firing her Travis's BB gun at Bud cans on their back porch, while I watched and screamed and cheered her on like a little animal. I loved shiny purple eyeshadow and pretending we were mermaids at the community pool in the summer and learning dance routines off MTV, which we would practice for hours in my room. We would stay up all night watching the scariest horror movies her daddy had on VHS, and scream our lungs out at every jump scare, and then laugh so hard at each other for being scared we almost pissed our pants. But I was never really scared when I was with her. On Chrissy's 10th birthday, we stole 2 of her mama's Newports and smoked them in secret like we were lighting birthday candles, giggling and choking on the spearmint smoke, side by side, crouched in the long grass with our knees touching. We felt like we were fully grown in our denim cutoffs underneath that yawning sky, studded with stars like spilled glitter. When I was 13, Chrissy was 13. We had waist-length hair we would brush for each other, yanking through tangles until we shone. We made matching friendship bracelets with our names spelled out in beads, so all the other girls in school would know that we were yin and yang. Where one went, the other would never be far behind. Twin flames. We always got joint invites, whether it was trailer park slumber parties on mattresses outside, or rich kids' pool parties in the big white houses at the edge of Marin. Because if I wasn't invited, Chrissy would go feral. Whoever's invite it was would end up begging me to come, admittedly sometimes crying. Chrissy had that effect, but nobody seemed to care. Everyone wanted to be her friend, like petting a stray dog before it bites because it looks so beautiful despite its jaws. We loved sharing vanilla lip gloss and dollar store perfume and reading teen magazines. We loved rhinestones and butterflies and boy bands and playing with hunting knives in the woods. When a kid called Billy Jensen and his slimy friends pinned me round the back of the gym, and Billy stuck his hand up my skirt, Chrissy punched him so hard she knocked his front tooth out and kept it in a matchbox like a little hunting trophy. I still have it on a shelf in my room. When I was 15, Chrissy was 15. I moved in with my Aunt Jane, and I had a backyard now too, and red curtains on my window she made for me herself, and Marin had never seemed smaller. Me and Chrissy would scheme all weekend, pinning maps to my bedroom walls, all the places we would be. We were going to burn high school to the ground. We were cheerleaders, and we swore we would be smarter and cooler and bigger, and stronger than everyone else. We would get our diplomas and leave everyone and everything in the rearview mirror as soon as we got our licenses. Send postcards from coast to coast. This town was small, and we were as big as the whole goddamn sky. We were going to chew it up and spit it back out, move to Hollywood or Alaska or Nashville or Paris or Hawaii or Tokyo or the fucking moon, and never ever look back. We were at that age when boys were still chasing us, and it wasn't just playground tag anymore. It was something more animal. But Chrissy had taught me how to run fast years ago, and we'd leave them in the dirt and laugh with all our teeth bared like fangs. We still loved glitter and ghost stories. We still loved riding our bikes down to the 7-Eleven for slushies, mine red and hers blue, so we could mix them and make purple, watching them melt on our tongues in the heat of summer. Chrissy tattooed a shooting star on her wrist with a needle, and her mama cried and said she was going straight to hell before she burst out laughing, realizing how ridiculous that was. Chrissy just laughed along with her, because she knew there are far worse things to do than put the night sky on your arm. Travis's dog, Buster, knocked up the neighbor's Bichon fries and dropped a litter of puppies right before Halloween, and we loved running round the backyard with them once their eyes opened and they found their feet chasing leaves and birds as the air turned cold. I helped Chrissy dye her hair bright pink in the bathroom sink one evening just after Valentine's Day, snow falling outside, music turned up loud enough to block out the sounds of her parents fighting with Luana for getting herself knocked up just like the neighbor's dog by one of the boys from the auto shop. We loved sharing bottles of Malibu and whiskey we'd steal off my mom, and we loved setting off bottle rockets in the backyard and screaming and spinning in circles underneath the trails of sparks like they were shooting stars, spinning and spinning and spinning until we fell down laughing. When I was 16, Chrissy was 16, and when I was 17, Chrissy was still 16, because one night in August, Chrissy was riding her bike home and a man was waiting for her on the side of a dusty back road that should have led home, and not to her death. He dragged her off her bike as the sun went down above the trees and the sky burned orange, and he chased her through the woods with a hunting knife, the kind you use for the soft belly of a deer. Only this time the chase wasn't pretend. It wasn't running from boys on the playground anymore. It wasn't human, it was animal, primal. And Chrissy had spent her whole life running, and she was fast, and she was strong, and she was brave. She ran so fast through those woods, like she was chasing horses, kicking up dust, like she could grow wings from her shoulder blades and just fly away. She almost made it. She almost fucking made it. But she didn't. When I was 18, Chrissy was still 16, because she died alone and scared, in the dark in the woods, and I wasn't there. and he smashed her head in with a rock and did things to her body while she was choking on her own blood that I can't even think about. And I wasn't there. And when I was 22, Chrissy was still 16 because she died and I didn't. And I miss her every single day when I wake up. And some nights when I can't sleep, I wish it had been me. I miss her in the summer, and I miss her in the winter, and I will never stop missing her, even when she's right here next to me. She wasn't like my sister, she was like my conjoined twin. We were fused. She was my family, my blood pact, my pinky promise, spit and swear it forever, one half of our secret handshake, the leader of our pack of two. Wherever she was where I would be, and then she was gone. I used to think that when she died, all the love went with her, but it's still here. You need to know about the love, I think, to understand the rest. It took them 4 days to find her body. They say God took 7 days to make the world, but it only took 4 days for our own to collapse. Every day, Chrissy's mom and all her uncles and aunts and cousins drove their trucks around Marin, handing out photos, kicking down doors, calling in favors, searching for her in strangers' beds and basements, screaming at our small-town cops to do better, look closer, crawl on their knees for traces of her. Every day Luana sat in the police station with my Aunt Jane, waiting for news, belly heavy in her hands, phoning hospitals all the way to state lines for any girl with pink hair, green eyes, stars on her skin. Every day Travis and their daddy went out with all their hunter friends, trucker caps covering worried eyes, old ladies from church in their hiking boots, kids from school with shovels, dragging the woods and the lakes and rivers, searching for that pink hair half buried in the dirt, or floating in a creek like reeds. But I spent that entire week sat on Chrissy's front porch, just waiting for her. Someone needed to be there when she got back. I would be there when she came back, and then we could laugh about it. I wanted to laugh about it with her. I slept out there with Buster the dog every night, just waiting, because I knew she was going to come home. Buster would howl, long and lonesome, like the world was ending because Chrissy wasn't here, and I knew exactly how he felt. He sounded just like my heart. Sometimes Travis would join me, and we'd sit shoulder to shoulder in silence, until he got restless and found his way back to the woods. Once Chrissy's mom tried to make me go home, called my Aunt Jane to come get me, then changed her mind. In the end, she just sat out there with me, passed me one of her Newports, her eyes glazed over, hands shaky, clutching her rosary and a bottle of beer. I knew she wished more than anything I was Chrissy sat beside her, my body buried in the woods or rotting in the trunk of a car instead, and I wished it too. Blew the cigarette out like a birthday candle, and wished and wished and wished. I dreamt about Chrissy running through the woods, and I would wake up in a sweat so heavy it was as if I'd been river baptized, terrified of the dark without her. Without her, there was no light left. She'd been the sun, and now everything was shadows. And then on the 4th day I woke up, and she was there watching me sweat, standing over me with her beautiful face half smashed in, blood in her pink hair, smile on her face. She knelt down and she laughed at me for still being scared of the dark like a little kid. I fell back asleep, and when I woke up for the 2nd time, Chrissy's mom was standing over me with those same evergreen eyes. Face so similar for a moment, I thought it was Chrissy again. She very gently told me that they'd found her, and that I should go back to sleep before she walked into the house. I heard her screaming from the kitchen, and she didn't stop for a long time. Travis and their dad had been the ones to find her, slowly rotting with maggots in her belly, blood fading to a dark maroon. All her daddy wanted to do was carry her out of the woods in his arms, small like a child still sleeping, the way he'd carried her out of the hospital when she was born. But he saw her, and he could only think crime scene. His little girl's body now a crime scene. His little girl now just a body. Travis told me later his dad had howled and beat his hands bloody on one of the trees waiting for the cops, fighting the urge to go to her, clawing at the dirt, staggering, pleading for them to hurry up. Terrified every second gone was more time wasted, more evidence fading. Travis just sat on his knees in the dirt like he was praying. Doesn't remember how he got to the ground. Kept waiting for her to get up, yelling at her to just get up, mad she was making their dad so upset. Travis called an ambulance, begging for them to hurry. They could still save her. Watching the maggots crawl in her belly, the blood crack around her mouth. They could still save her. She just needed to get up and she'd be okay. They could still save her. And when the cops came, leading his dad away, trying to bandage his hands, hanging out yellow tape, they pulled Travis up, dragging him away when he wouldn't move. Couldn't move. And he just kept thinking that he wasn't the one that needed to get up. She was. She had to. They could still save her. He could still save her. Travis told me later when his mom showed up that she just kept grabbing cops while they tried to placate her, saying over and over, "That ain't my girl, you've made a mistake. That's someone else's daughter. Somebody should call her poor mother so she's not alone. She'll be getting worried, you see." I know how worried she must be, bless her heart. It'll be dark soon, and she'll start to worry about her daughter. You should call her. I can do it for you if it's easier. Mother to mother, you know how it is. It's okay, I forgive you. Everybody makes mistakes. But that's not Christine, you see. So we need to find her. That's not Chrissy. We need to find my baby. You need to keep looking. Please just keep looking. That ain't my girl. That ain't my girl. Kept saying it until there was nobody left to listen. My best friend is dead, and there ain't a damn thing either of us can do about it. But being dead has its perks. Chrissy says it's hard to describe, as the dead don't sleep, and the dead can't dream. But sometimes, a little like when your eyes unfocus, a little like when you wake up, still half asleep, and for a moment you can't be sure if you're awake or dreaming. Chrissy slips into a place she calls the in-between. It's like dreaming, only it's the truth. Things that could or will or might happen. Endless possibilities stretching out, that the dead can see and feel, because the possibilities that float through the in-between end in death. Death leaves a trail wherever it goes. It stains the fabric of the world, Chrissy says. It causes ripples in the universe, leaves things dark. To be specific, Chrissy can see when someone is going to be killed. To be really specific, Chrissy can see when girls around her age or abouts are going to be abducted or violated or brutally murdered, just like she was. I don't know why. She can't explain it. She says it would be like trying to explain breathing if you'd never had lungs. She says it's like muscle memory, for muscles and memories I don't have. She says since she died, it's like she was born knowing these things. They've always been in her heart and in her head. It's just now she's dead that she can see them clearly, like the fog has lifted. She says it's like a feeling in her now non-existent ghostly gut, but sometimes she slips through to the in-between and comes out with these visions. They start hazy, but the closer and closer the days get to the murder, the clearer the visions become, like a camera focusing. The fog lifts, and she can see the name and the face of the victim and the killer, until she can feel their thoughts, taste their feelings, their possibilities. This is where I come in. The dead can't dream, and the dead can't sleep, but the dead also can't touch. I would give anything to hold her one more time, but she just passes right through me, which is not a pleasant feeling, believe me. But the living can touch, and the living can also hold a gun or a crowbar or a shovel, which I do. The living can bury bodies and bleach blood off the tile grout, and burn evidence in a trash can in the backyard, which I also do. Don't get me wrong, I don't often kill these men. I can still count on my hands the amount of people I've killed, although I'm starting to run out of fingers. Sometimes I can put a payphone and some pocket change to use, can anonymously tip off police and get them arrested before they can do any damage. Sometimes I can stall my car in traffic and make them just 5 minutes late, and it changes everything. Sometimes I just have to drop a threatened letter in red Sharpie saying, "I'm watching you, motherfucker," through their front door, and they become so paranoid, they don't act on anything. Sometimes I can to the girl first, convince her to be somewhere else that night, or just stop and talk about the weather for long enough, that they walk down the street at a totally different time than they would have, and the man that was going to kill them with a claw hammer walks right by without noticing them. 5 minutes can change the entire goddamn universe in ways you wouldn't believe. Last month, I spent 5 minutes with a girl named Lorelei Lucas. I was wearing white jeans, and I'd carefully smeared a little blood across the back of them, and walked past her in line at the grocery store. Chrissy had seen Lorelei Lucas and her bouncy dark hair and her chipped front tooth, and her secret dreams of becoming an architect floating out there in the in-between. She'd seen her kindness, the overflowing love she had for her little sister, her deep belief that what you put out you get back. So I walked past her where she stood in line holding a paper bag of red apples and a box of pink wine. Lorelei's hand had flown to her mouth, smudging her peachy lip gloss a little, and she'd reached out and grabbed my elbow. "Oh honey, stop a sec," she'd said. I'd looked at her, miming my confusion, wide-eyed. "I think your Aunt Flo has come for a visit a little early," she'd whispered loudly and kindly in her Bayou drawl, gesturing down at my jeans. I turned round and looked, gasped, feigning mortification, and she just smiled and slipped off her red cardigan and tied it round my waist without hesitation. Lorelei was only a year older than I was, yet as she tied the sleeves, her hands steady and sure, I suddenly felt so small, like she was my mother taking care of me. The world slowed for a minute as I watched her French tip nails, the little gold heart on the ring looped round her pinky finger. It's hard to remember sometimes with all that I do that people can still be kind, for no other reason than that's who they are. I'd protested and she'd just shaken her head and smiled. "No, you keep it, honey," she'd said. Again, I felt like she was my mother smoothing my hair back, setting the tipped-up world back to rights. You just pay it forward somehow. When I thanked her, I wasn't pretending. I meant it. If only she knew how I was paying it forward. Chrissy had seen flashes of that same red cardigan in an evidence locker. Nearly black, it was so blood-stained and tattered from where Lorelei Lucas had been stabbed repeatedly through the stomach with a rusty copper pipe and ripped open, left in pieces on the floor of an abandoned dairy barn. But because she stopped me in the grocery store, because she was kind, because she couldn't stand to ignore someone that needed help, she didn't walk home down the road that would have taken her past a dusty black van. She didn't stop for the man leaning out of the back, pleading with her to help his little daughter inside. She didn't stoop through the van door, and she wasn't met with a solvent-soaked rag across the face. Her hands and ankles weren't duct-taped together. Her underwear wasn't cut from between her legs with kitchen scissors, and she wasn't driven out to a dilapidated barn that would be the last place she ever drew breath. That little gold ring on her finger turning red in her guts as she fought to hold her stomach together, intestines unspooling around her. Instead, she saw a girl that needed help, gave me the cardigan off her back, and it reminded her so much of middle school and her sister that she called her up. And they hadn't spoken much lately, life getting in the way, but they laughed so hard on the phone about growing up. They decided that they missed each other's faces and decided to meet up and reminisce some more over spiced teas and green salsa. So Lorelei Lucas walked the other way home to her sister's house and spent the night drinking pink wine and laughing and playing all the songs they'd loved as kids as loud as the speakers would go, dancing round the kitchen until the neighbors banged on the walls to turn it down. And the man in the dusty black van sat on that street waiting until a cop car cruised past and spooked him so bad that he sped on the way home, wasn't watching the road, and ended up driving that dusty black van straight into a quarry ditch. And it wasn't a bad crash. He would have been a little banged up but fine if it wasn't for the bottle of chemical solvent that spilled, that soaked rag catching on the sparks and smoke from the crushed engine and setting the van alight in seconds. He never did manage to open the door, stuck against the quarry rocks on the other side, fighting beneath the airbag and twisted seat belt. The very things meant to keep him safe used against him. He was dead in 5 minutes, just 5 minutes, and nothing but charred flesh and black bones, with nobody to bear witness but a ghost of a pink-haired girl who stayed and watched to make sure he burned all the way down to nothing. Funny how it works, ain't it? What you put out, you get back. What you get, you pay forward. The thing is, sometimes 5 minutes isn't enough. Some of these men are like bottomless black pits, straight into hell. infinite and unrelenting and evil. They won't stop for anything. They're like darkness as the sun goes down. You can try and outrun it, but the night still comes. You can't tip off the police because they hide it too well. They're too charming or too careful or too practiced. You can't convince their victim to be somewhere else that night, or make her late, or make sure he never walks past her, because he will simply just choose another girl. He will always choose another girl. It doesn't matter if you change things by 5 minutes or 5,000 minutes. They will never ever stop. Their possibilities ripple through the universe, like black rot spreading, like poison in the water. As long as they're alive, the poison spreads, and there is no cure. Sometimes they need to die. Sometimes I have to suck out the poison, even if it means tasting some myself. And I do it. Whenever I'm washing out blood from the cracks in my nails that belonged to a man who had a penchant for schoolgirls, or stitching up a split lip and a hole in my shoulder from a fight I almost lost with a chainsaw-wielding psycho, long story, or straining the muscles in my shoulders from digging a hole big enough to drop a body into, I think about the girls. The life they get to live, never knowing it was almost taken from them. They get to grow up. They get to fall in love with the boy or girl next door and get married in a white dress and have babies they'll name after their favorite flowers. They get to be heartbroken and divorced, smash wine glasses against their bedroom walls, and total their ex-husband's cars. They get to be high school dropouts with a DUI and a suitcase full of broken dreams. But they still get to dream. They get to be doctors and lawyers and firefighters, astronauts, strippers and preschool teachers, ballerinas and bartenders, artists and addicts, cocktail waitresses and congresswomen. They get to drink too much and try too hard or not at all and fuck everything up over and over, and they get to try again and again every single day. All the beautiful, terrible, wonderful, fucked up mistakes that make up a life. They get it all. They get Christmases and Hanukkahs and New Year's and Diwalis. They get car crashes and college graduations and coffee in the morning, made by someone that loves them. They get black eyes and breakups and best friends that drive all night just to see them and pick up the pieces. They get to sing off key with the windows down as they drive home from jobs they hate, and come home to people that bought them pastries from their favorite bakery, just because they knew they were having a shitty day. They get to call their mom on her birthday, and they get to hug little brothers goodnight, and they get to fight with their older sisters over the remote, and they get to cook dinner with their dad on his day off. They get to swim in the ocean and catch snowflakes on their tongues. They get fireworks and birthday cakes and weddings and funerals. They get to feel the rain on their face and sun on their skin, watch the seasons change. They get wrinkled and grey and old, and they get to live long enough to forget what it's like to be 16. And every single second is a gift they don't even know they've received. They get to die old and content and surrounded by loved ones, or old and mean and alone, but it doesn't matter either way, because they get to die when they're meant to, on their terms, on their time, not because of a man who decided to rip them out of the life they should have lived. We never really get to see the girls again once we save them. It's almost the hardest part sometimes, saving the life of someone who will never even know you exist. They walk past me like a stranger, and they never look back. They don't know I've killed for them, and I don't get to know what they will do with the life I've given back to them. And they never even see Chrissy at all. But sometimes Chrissy gets little flashes that fall through the in-between like shooting stars, bright and burning and exploding with light. Flashes of lives that shake the universe a little. One girl who would have been kept in a basement tied to a pole until she starved to death, grew up and became a surgeon. She had a bad temper and was never around enough to save her marriage, but she saved so many thousands of lives that she made ripples in the universe, glowing and soaking up the spreading poison like an antidote. One girl who would have been cut into little pieces and scattered along the highways in black refuse sacks grew up and became a single mom and stripper. She had a mean right hook and a fucking foul mouth, and she was unrelentingly kind and generous and loving. A violent and unstoppable force of pure blinding goodness and love that touched the lives of everyone around her, so bright that it sent ripples through the universe like waves of sunlight on a beach, washing away a little of the darkness in everyone she met. The point isn't if these girls grow up to be good or bad or both. The point isn't whether one life is worth saving more than another. The point is that they are alive. The point is they get to grow up and make the choice to be good or bad or both for themselves. Chrissy never got that choice. I did. And this is what I've chosen. And I'd choose it over and over and over. And so that August morning, laying side by side on my bed, discussing the murder of a man whose name I didn't know yet with my dead best friend, I was thinking about choices.